Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. In the podcast today, we have Renee and her mother, Shirley. Renee, a single mum by choice, shares with us today her journey of making decisions when her baby was showing reduced movements in utero. She was very clear about what she wanted and what she didn't want. Her labour started with an induction and an early labour, which she enjoyed and appreciated. She then lost her focus due to an unskilled doctor and took back her power to make a decision that was in line with her vision for her daughter's arrival. The power of her preparation ensured that she was able to say no and follow her own path. There's lots to learn in this story, so enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, everyone. It's the Transform Your Birth podcast again this week. And with me today is lovely Renee and her mum, Shirley. Renee is a single mum by choice and she's a powerhouse. She's just the most gorgeous woman. And Shirley was able to share this experience with her. So we're really lucky to have a mother and daughter duo. Thanks for coming, you two.
You're welcome.
And we've got little Leonora as well, who's 4 months old. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to be able to see this gorgeous little girl watching us. So Renee, you were pregnant.
Yes.
And how are you feeling about that? Tell us about how you were feeling and then what sort of preparation did you do?
Yeah. So my pregnancy was, so obviously Leonora is a donor baby, so she was by artificial insemination, and so my whole pregnancy was quite calculated. Everything down to a T. It sort of took out the not the joy. Like I still had a very joyful pregnancy, but everything was very medical and clinical. And as I got towards the end of my pregnancy and starting to think about that birth process and what that would mean for me, I was getting a little nervous because, you hear all the horror stories from people, they share their stories with you, and you never hear any powerful stories, except for a couple of girlfriends who, said that they felt really empowered by giving birth and, just blown away by the whole experience. And so those stories started to creep through, and I started to, be a bit more prepared about what the birth could be like. But I also, because she's an IVF baby, I did have some health issues that put me in the fetal medicine unit as well. So I was monitored quite closely and had a lot of different expertise advice on how I should birth, which sort of muddied the waters a little bit as well. So as I got towards the end, I sort of needed to make a decision between induction or cesarean, or to let it go naturally was sort of taken off the table for me. So grappling with that decision towards the end of the pregnancy was challenging.
That's hard, isn't it? Because there can be a lot of fear around what if, X happens. And in terms of being able to make decisions like that, how were you able to sort of find your true north in that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the internet is great, but it's also, accessible. It's all
it's a minefield.
Because you can overwhelm yourself quite easily. I guess I just took the advice of the clinicians that I had to see throughout my pregnancy. I have an autoimmune condition, so I took the advice of my rheumatologist, the fertility doctors that I was seeing, and then the fetal medicine doctors. And so weighing up, but as you say, it's really difficult. They can't give you a definitive answer. Birth is just whatever she wanted, really. And so, there was a lot of risk, it just like risk mitigation almost, like these are the percentage of something happening versus this. So I just had to make informed decision based on what I felt was right. I was always nervous about the induction process. One of the conditions I had that we were being monitored for was that Leonora could have got congenital heart block. And so that was something that I was very nervous about. I didn't want to end up having an emergency cesarean. Being a solo mum, I really wanted to be present in the birth as much as I could. I didn't want to welcome her into the world all drugged out. I wanted to be present. It's just going to be the two of us. So I wanted it to be a beautiful experience. So the idea of an induction made me quite nervous, because in my mind, I sort of associated that could end in an emergency cesarean, and that's not how I didn't want to be knocked out cold. I didn't want her to be taken away. And so that was weighing on my mind. I did your Transform Your Birth class, and I went, wow, this is, the natural way is the way that I want to go. But I sort of had that deadline from the doctors being, you have to go at 39 weeks. So just depends if you want to go, like if that happens naturally, great. If it doesn't, we couldn't let you go to 41 weeks. So I sort of just made that decision to prepare for a natural birth, mentally, physically, get my mind and body right, because that's what I wanted. She had other plans, but that was the goal anyway.
Yeah. So I'm a bit curious then, Renee, when you did the Transform Your Birth course, it would have opened you up to new possibilities, and making decisions with your individual set of conditions and context would have been an important thing. How were you able to use that knowledge to help, to help you navigate some of that really important decision making, because every decision sets up a totally different trajectory?
Yeah, so I guess for me, from the Transform Your Birth class, the calming techniques, the meditation, the breathing were all, to be honest, really new concepts to me. I run at 100 miles an hour all the time. My mind is all over the place. I have a very stressful, high pressure job. And so the idea of calming down and, being in myself and, breathing through things was something very foreign to me. And so once I sort of tapped into that a little bit and I saw the benefit of that, not only in my preparation for birth, but also in my daily life, everything sort of slowed down a little bit, and I had a bit more of a clearer mind. And so with that gave me the opportunity to explore other things outside of the medical advice that I got. But I always had that in my mind. Like I never went to my medical professionals and said, oh, I'm going to go at 40 weeks because, natural birth is my, number one priority. It was my number one priority was still her health and safety. And if that meant that I had to be induced or I had to have a cesarean earlier, then that was going to be our plan. But, learning those concepts and then also just being familiar with what's to come, how an actual birth works. Or like I was still blown away that women don't give birth on their back, lying on a bed. It was just, it just sort of really opened my mind. And not that I was ignorant up until that point, but I definitely didn't, seek out what's going to happen in birth because I didn't want to, psych myself out, so to speak. But after doing that, I definitely had very informed discussions with my medical team about okay, well, if this is an option and I really want to go naturally and I want to do it without drugs, how can we do this safely so that we don't put her under stress and that we don't end up having an emergency cesarean? So it just allowed me, I guess, by giving me more information and knowledge, and also the capacity to think about things differently really, really helped me.
Yeah, that's just gold to hear and music to my ears, because as you know, I do this with lots and lots of people with all different sets of circumstances, but I always maintain that the skills that we're learning are as much for life as they are for birth, and the ability to stay calm and to work with birth under all circumstances what sets up the mind and unloads the subconscious fear center that tends to hold on to everybody's stories and what they've Googled, and which can create a lot of tension in their own minds. So having tools like that to anchor yourself regardless of what unfolds is very powerful. Shirley, I'd love to hear from you now, because here you are, Renee's mum. You birthed your children in a very different era, and you were coming into the birth, and you came and did the course with Renee. What sort of changes did you notice in yourself around what you thought your role was, and then what you ultimately ended up doing in support of Renee?
When Renee asked me to be her birthing partner, I was a little nervous, really.
Yeah.
It was a bit of the unknown too for me in that role. But it was just lovely, and it was so nice to see her and the way she coped, her strength really in making decisions about her path, which was really good, because I think sometimes you could get wrapped up in what people tell you you should do. And when Renee made that decision to have a cesarean, I was so proud of her for following her heart and where she wanted to be. So I've just got added pride really in Renee and how she's handled it. And being a mother, she's just a wonderful mother.
Yeah. What a gift. What a gift of sharing that experience with your little daughter too, your granddaughter.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. So Renee, how about you talk us through then what unfolded in your journey and how you made the decisions you made?
Yeah. So as I said before, the option for me was inducement at 39 weeks or planned cesarean. And so I just decided to go down the being induced, hoping that she would come, at 39 weeks and it'd be fine. And then I would use the techniques that I've learnt and that I was practicing quite religiously. I was doing the meditations every morning and night. I was breathing through things. I was using work as a bit of a platform for practice.
Test it out.
Yeah.
You would have been a Zen monk by the end of that. That's big commitment right there.
Yeah, it was great. And then so we worked with the medical team at the Canberra Hospital, who were just fantastic. I had the best doctors and midwives through the fetal medicine unit. Cannot fault that process. And so we had regular scans and everything. And this little one, we didn't know that she was a she at the time, but had different plans. I finished work, and then the week after, so I was about 36 weeks, the week after I had reduced fetal movements. And I just assumed that was to do with work, because, I've been running on adrenaline for so long. Like the last thing I did at work was run an event for close to 15,000 people. So I was just running on adrenaline.
Oh, you would have been.
The whole time. So then finally finished and I was on maternity leave. I just assumed that, I wasn't feeling as many movements because, talking about you. Because of that. And so when I had my checkup, the midwife said, "Oh no, you need to get that checked now." So we went down and had monitoring. And as I said, we were looking for congenital heart block throughout the whole pregnancy. So I was getting scans every 4 weeks. Her heart was fine, but every time I sort of went in for monitoring, we were on the monitor for a lot longer because they couldn't get a proper sort of baseline. So that week before she was born, I was in and out of the monitoring unit, just getting monitored. The movements were happening, but they weren't as what they were throughout the whole pregnancy. So it felt like she was doing somersaults in my belly through the second half of the pregnancy. And so I must say that the comms around that, if you're if you're feeling reduced movements, to just go and get checked immediately, because it's the first sign that your baby can be sick, and that's them telling you something. They've done a good job at promoting that, and I'm so thankful for that, because each time I was there a little bit longer, to the point where the doctor said, we need to induce you tonight. And that was just, oh no, I'm just here for monitoring. Because each time I'd go, I had been monitored, and an hour and a half, they would go, yep, she's fine, off you go, you can go home. And then the last time I went in, they said, no, your baby's telling you something. We need to listen. I was just 37 weeks. So I was not mentally prepared for that. I still had the contents of my hospital bag like sprawled out on the dining table. Mum wasn't even here. Like it was, it was just, I was very nervous and very scared. One, I didn't want to be induced. Two, I didn't want to be induced that early. And here we were. So I luckily talked them into letting me go home to have a shower and pack the rest of my hospital bag, which was great, because it meant that I could have a shower, and I could, I lit some candles, I put on some music, and I just got into the zone and thought, this is going to happen. I'm definitely going to be in the right frame of mind for it. And so I just started, positive affirmations, telling myself I'm going to meet them soon. And
that what you're saying there, Renee, is quite golden, because sometimes assuming that there's space for this to happen, when we take a woman from, we're going down this path, and actually, no, we're now going down this path. If women have the time and the space to recalibrate, and a sleep, that's always a bonus, then it means that they can bring themselves into, okay, now we're going down this path. If it's thrust upon them a bit too quickly, it can be very overwhelming. And it's a little bit like being on the back foot from the very beginning. And you don't want to do that. I've had women who've, they've suggested inductions at certain times and said, well, we'll start to induce you tonight. And women say, no, I need a good night's rest. Assuming that I've got that space, how about we line up for this tomorrow? And to really push back sometimes against the, oh, well, we do this now, because that's not always good for the emotional state of the mother. And that's absolutely paramount to the, the protection of the baby as well. So I love that you did that. And not only did it, but did it with candles and, really got yourself into the zone.
Yeah, well, when we walked in to get monitored, because that was my fourth time that week getting monitored.
Yeah.
And so I knew the process. I knew they'd strap me up with the bands. I would get a little button and I'd press it every time I felt a movement. This time, the midwife on duty came in and said, and she had gloves and she had I don't know, whatever it was. And she said, okay, so if you could just, take your shoes and socks and your pants off, and I'll do the vaginal examination. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if you've got the wrong room, but I'm here for just to be monitored. She's like, oh no, we're going to do a stretch and sweep now. And I was, oh, hold on a second. Wait, no, that's not what I want. Yeah. I was I was under the assumption that I was here to get monitored, and everything's okay or everything's not okay, and then we discuss options about what's happening. So, and she was like, oh, sorry, I just assumed that you knew that, no, if this is the fourth time that you're presenting, you've got to go. And so she said, oh, well, I'll go and talk to the doctor first. And so if I hadn't have said anything or didn't know to say anything, then it could have been a very different experience.
And that certainly that communication breakdown can cause a lot of stress in women. So that's wonderful that you're able to do that. They must have been worried about her growth, were they? Was that one of the other reasons they were concerned, or was it just purely fetal movements?
It was purely fetal movement,
right.
And the fact that it just took them a a longer time to get a baseline, a good baseline for them to say, yeah, she's fine, off you go. But it was really the amount of time that, because that was the 4th time I'd gone to the unit in that week. So they were like, no, something. And it was good. The doctor who suggested the induction start that night was the same doctor that I had a few days before. So at least I felt comfortable that it was the same doctor who had seen me previously as well.
Yeah. So talk us through how it unfolded on the day.
Yeah. So as I said, we went home. I had a shower. Mum packed the rest of the contents of the hospital bag, and so it was a wonderful evening. It wasn't stressful at all, even though I'm probably sure it was very stressful for Mum, making sure she put the right things in the right compartments and all of that stuff.
The logistics officer.
Yeah, logistics. But from my perspective, I was able to have the time to mentally get in the zone. And by the time I came out and I was ready to go back to the hospital, Mum had everything packed, and it looked like it was seamless, which I know that it wouldn't have been. And I'm very grateful for that, because there was no stress in that time. It was just beautiful preparation. It was more of an excitement about what's to come. Obviously, yes, I was very nervous about the induction, but I was trying not to think about the process, and I was trying to think about what I would get at the end of that. And I was so excited to meet her and start this journey. But I was also quite, I guess, still nervous about that emergency cesarean component. Like, that was probably the thing that was just in the pit of my stomach the whole time, that I knew that I didn't want. And so there was just that inkling and that feeling that I couldn't shake, regardless of how much I went into myself, or I did the the positive affirmations. I was still very concerned about that.
Well, that's that protective response from the mother, isn't it? And there was concern about how robust she was and what sort of pressure you wanted to put her in during the birth process. So that's really wise. So tell us more.
So then we went back to the hospital, and we had a vaginal examination, and she said that I was 1.5 centimeters dilated, and that she could feel baby's head. And so because of that, they didn't want to do the balloon catheter, because they were worried that they would push her back up. But they didn't mention anything else about the balloon catheter and where that usually sits within the process. And so I didn't think anything of it. And so they went straight to the cervidil tape. So the tape was inserted. By this time, it was about 11 o'clock at night. So it was very late. And I was still in the monitoring unit. So I just had one of those temporary little seats that reclined, and they put her back on the monitor. And I was sort of stuck there. I couldn't leave because they couldn't get a proper baseline of her heart. And so we just, sorry, I've just put my shirt up, and she's like at my shirt trying to find my nipple. And so I had to wait there pretty much until, I don't know what time it was, 2:30 in the morning. So that was about 3.5 hours after the tape had been inserted. And then I was finally moved to a bed, and that was at about 3:30. So it's like, great, I can get some sleep and we'll get going. But then my contractions started at about 4:15. So it was a long day, and it was an even longer morning. I had contractions pretty much the entire time that the cervidil was in. And so they wanted to keep that in for 24 hours. So they were coming back at 11 p.m. that night to take it out and see what my dilation was at that point. So consistently from 4:30 that morning all the way through to 11 p.m. I was contracting. My contractions were every 60 seconds for 60 seconds. Like I thought, like, this is it. This is go time. She's ready to come. And that was actually a beautiful day. Because I was really in the zone. I was, on the ball. I was walking. I was, doing the breathing. I was owning it. I felt so powerful, in control. I used, what you said about every contraction is a step closer. And I just pictured that. I just pictured me, like on a hike, and each contraction just took me a step closer to her. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience.
Wow. I've got goosebumps listening to that. It's beautiful.
But then until they came back and they took the tape out, and they said, oh, you're 1 centimeter dilated. I was like, are you okay? So I've just done that for 24 hours, and nothing, that didn't work. And then so I got in my head a little bit, because, and that was one of the things on my birth plan I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know how many centimeters I was dilated.
Yeah.
Know how far I've got left to go. But I understand that's what they needed to say to inform the next part of the induction process. But I felt a little defeated, but I didn't stay there long. I got myself out. I let myself feel it and go, okay, yep, that sucks. That's annoying that you've gone through all of that and you've actually gone back, because before the tape you're 1.5, now you're only 1. But I just put that to the side and went, okay, so what's next then? What are we doing next? And tried to get myself prepared for that. Luckily, because it was so late at night, it was about 1:30 in the morning at that point, and I'd been up pretty much straight for about 30 hours or so. They said, have a good night's sleep, and tomorrow we'll do the balloon catheter. So then the next morning, another midwife came in and she said, I don't know why they did the tape. They should have done the balloon catheter first. There's another woman who's had the same experience, and that's weird. We'll just send you down for the balloon catheter. And I must say, they were the things that disabled me. When I was focusing so much on being in control and, yep, that was horrible. Okay, what's next? I was really coaching myself through this, but then I would have someone come in and say things like that would just make me unstable a little bit. And so I was trying to focus on getting in the right frame of mind again after all of those.
It's also an example of different people have different opinions, and that's often the biggest shock that people find when they come into the medical system, often for the first time in their life, is conflicting advice. One person will see a situation and believe that the best path is going left, and the other person will say, oh, no, we need to go right. And that can be very confusing in trying to walk our own path and stay, connected to what we feel we need to do when you're getting different messages. Yes. So power to you, Renee, for getting back on track. It shows a great inbuilt resilience right there. How were you able to, so you went ahead and got the balloon catheter?
Yes, got the balloon catheter, and that's where it all went wrong for me. Right. The balloon catheter, there's been some changes that midwives aren't allowed to do those. It has to be a doctor, unless the midwives have the specific training to do it. So I understand the policy change and everything. Yeah. That's fine. But the doctor that was on call that day, he had either never done one before or hadn't done one in a very long time, or had done one in a different country. It was a very traumatic experience, and it started that way from the get-go. It was awful. Mum just, we can laugh about it now, but Mum described it as like a Faulty Towers episode.
Oh,
like
goodness.
Would go wrong, went wrong. And it all started, and I should have known, because at the beginning, the tray with all the utensils was sitting sort of outside of the room, and the doctor was looking at the tray, looking at me, looking at the tray, looking at the midwife, and the midwife's like, are you okay? He said, do I bring this in? Do you want me to take this into the room? even things like, and opening it, he's like, oh, what's this? Looking at all of the different utensils and what they do, and the midwife's explaining to him what they are.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
That's not very confidence creating.
And so
really
I'm seeing this. I'm sitting up there, my legs are spread, my cervix is out, you know, and I'm hearing this. And
he wasn't talking to you.
He wasn't talking to me. No. So he never said anything to me. And the midwife was like, yep, so this is the balloon and this is the, yep, just unwrap that. He goes, so I unwrap this. And she's like, yep, you unwrap that. He didn't know how much fluid to go into the balloon. So they had to go and check that.
So Renee, when you look back at that situation, what wisdom would you give another woman in a situation where you're not feeling very confident about the person who's caring for you? How would you deal with that differently?
Stop immediately. Yeah. I would ask them to stop immediately and ask if there was someone else who could do this.
Absolutely.
Because
that when we're dealing with birth, we don't, and this is difficult because obviously everybody's learning and we want to support learning and students to progress in their capability. But this is big business for us, and this is your first baby, a very loved, wanted child, concern around her welfare and how she would go with the stress. I think what Renee is sharing with us there is some great little wisdom around, if you're not feeling confident with your caregivers, or if you have a caregiver that isn't floating your boat, don't ever be afraid for your partner or your birth support person to go out and say, this person isn't working for me. Who else have you got?
Yes.
We do have the right to push back on somebody who's performing something, and obviously in a less than confident way, or just there's just a personality clash there. Women in labour need to be surrounded by people who have where she feels safe. And what you're describing there is not safety. So after that, what happened?
So it was so that procedure took a lot longer than what it should have. I experienced some bleeding, and then they were trying to find gauze. I could hear them running around the corridors trying to find things, and so after that, I had to walk back up to the ward, and then I was still experiencing contractions, but they were sort of lesser intense and further apart. But I was rattled. I was so rattled after that. It was very painful. It was horrendous. It was, and then having the catheter in for 24 hours was uncomfortable as well. But my mental toughness just deteriorated after that. And then all I could focus on was what was next, and if it would be anything like that. Or worse. If the pain, not pain, but if that trauma escalated even further, then that takes me to that spot that I was really nervous about, which was the emergency cesarean. And so everything sort of started to correlate and to that point this is going to result in me having an emergency cesarean because my body is not responding in this way. And that was traumatic. The next step was to have my waters broken, and then to have the symptocin, which is I did not want that at all. So, throughout that entire 24-hour period, I really tried to get myself back onto that mental track, and I just really struggled. I had a couple of girlfriends come in and see me, and usually they just lift my spirits entirely, but I was like a shell of a person. And I was just watching the clock going, okay, they're going to come back in a couple of hours and they're going to take it out, and then this is going to happen. They're going to break my waters. And then I was just getting overwhelmed by what was next, and that was going to take me closer to what I didn't want. So Mum and I just had a chat about, okay, well, what if they take it out and you haven't dilated? Why don't we just say let's just ask to have a cesarean because what's coming next can be worse. And I just don't want to have that emergency cesarean. And then all I could hear in my head was all of the medical advice I got from Day Dot around plan cesarean 39 weeks. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this my way. So,
well, one of the things though that must be mentioned with that, it can be very disheartening when women have had a big labour like you did. You had, 24 hours at least of contractions. Contractions are never a waste. And it's something that we should never underestimate the power of what contractions are actually doing in our body, what they're releasing hormonally, and how they're preparing baby for life outside the womb. So, and I know women who have elective cesareans, they often feel that they've missed out on something. Often they're having them for medical reasons with good reason to do so, but there's that feeling of loss that can come when we don't get to experience that labour. Do you feel like that's the case as you look at it now? It's such a shame you had that piece where that person completely hijacked your mental state and your capacity to flow with what was going on. But as you look at it now, do you feel grateful that you had the contractions? Are you able to?
I do. I really do. Because I wanted to experience that. I wanted to have that, her and I battling it out, during that birth process, but also in life. And so I really, I felt so powerful in those moments. And I was angry for quite a while after the birth to be stripped of that, through that, dodgy balloon catheter experience. I was quite mad for a while that I couldn't have the journey that I wanted to because of that, because it derailed me entirely. And it's like my sliding door moment. What if that didn't happen? What would be our journey? And how would I have that strength? And so part of me sometimes feels like, not that I missed out, but I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't strong enough. I didn't do it the traditional way that, and so I feel like lesser than. But
women are very quick to internalize those sorts of things and blame themselves for it. Biologically, Renee, you needed to be in a space of safety. For any animal, any human to birth, we need to feel safe. And it was really unfortunate that in that space you didn't feel safe and you did get derailed. But the flip side of that, though, is it can help you to have huge compassion for what women go through who aren't necessarily well prepared or have the right support around them. Now you understand how easy it is for women to lose their ability to flow with labour, not against it. And, even people that have prepared with me and they've done all the right things, and done all the preparation and the practices and the breathing and still have experiences like that. They often say, gosh, I can see how easy it is to lose focus. So as women, we shouldn't internalize that blame for it, because your body is a biological response to your environment in that space, and you didn't have the right environment.
No.
Yeah. So I really want you to hear that. And for anybody listening as well, it's so important we have the capacity to choose our caregivers if we can. I mean, that's not always available to us to have continuity of care or the people that we know around us. But if you don't, if you're in a situation where you don't have that, having someone like a doula or somebody who can kind of help work the system and be a little bit savvy around, no, let's stop this right now, because it's hard for you to think in that moment. Let's stop this right now. Obviously, you're not confident doing this.
Yeah.
Is that what are our other options here? So partners getting on board around this, or having doulas or people who can help you work the system. It is hard. It is hard when people are humans and caregivers are humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt really sorry for the midwife in the balloon catheter, because she obviously knew, she'd seen like probably hundreds. She didn't have that one's certification to do it. I would have much preferred for her to do it even without that certification, rather than coaching him through it.
So tell us now, Renee, about the cesarean. How did that unfold?
Yeah, so so when they came in to take the catheter out and I hadn't dilated much further, that was like the defining moment to being like, okay, obviously my body's not responding in this way.
You took back control.
Yeah. Very sleepy.
Yeah. She's tired now, you can see it.
Yeah, so when they... Do you want me to take you for a walk? Yeah, maybe. And then he'll take you for a walk. Yeah, so when they took out the catheter, I just said, I want to stop the process. I was so nervous about having that discussion, not because I was nervous in myself for asking for it. I was nervous in the reactions that I would get, and that was really shaking me a little bit in having the conversation. So rather, my goal was to just be really definitive and say, I want you to stop. I didn't need to elaborate. It was my journey, my body. And
good point. Very good point. You don't have to justify your decisions. Absolutely. It's a woman's choice.
Yeah. And people are entitled to feel the way they want to feel to a decision that I've made. That's fine. And their opinions weren't going to weigh on me, because again, I wanted to be as present as I could be with her. And so once I made that decision, the medical team were sort of mixed. One said, okay, no worries, your choice, your birth, you can do what you like. One was like, oh, look, this is normal, that, women's bodies don't respond, you're only 37 weeks, so of course this is going to take a little bit longer, and this time is normal. So sort of, I could tell what was happening. She was trying to coach me into, continuing down a path. I said, look, I completely understand that, and I'm thankful and grateful for your advice, but I'm very comfortable in my decision, and this is what I want to do. They did say that the doctor would have to come and talk to me, and I saw that as another battle that I had to fight. But the doctor was fantastic. She came in and sort of said the same things, like, this is normal, part of the process, but completely understand. And then just went straight to the process of what happens with a cesarean. The moment I made that decision and it was set in motion, I was a completely different person, back to my original frame of mind. I was so happy and content and proud of myself for making that decision. I was excited again about the journey, about me. I was still having random little contractions. And so there was that possibility that she could just come naturally. So I was also excited about that as well. And it was just a completely different experience. I was relaxed, I was happy, I was experiencing everything and loving it, not like focused on the nervousness or the fear of the next induction process. Because I wasn't emergency, was sort of half, because it wasn't planned. I was sort of halfway through labor. So they decided to put me on not the emergency list, but another list. But then I was booked in for 8:30 that night, and then an emergency came in, and then I was booked in the next morning, and then an emergency came in. And so it was
wow.
It's not, it's happening, it's not. But then, because of that runaround, I was first cab off the rank on the 15th of May, and they came and got me at 7 o'clock. I was not nervous one little bit about having major abdominal surgery. I was not worried about it at all. I was just so excited that I was going to meet this little one. In my birth preferences, I had that I didn't want anyone in the medical team to reveal her gender once she was born. So I was really excited for that, even though there's going to be thousands of people around, and it's going to be, like light and chaos and noise. It's just going to be me and them. And that's really what I wanted to, block out all of that and just focus on them holding up that little baby.
Beautiful. And tell us what it was like when you met her.
Oh, well, the whole process, I think the thing that took the longest was the spinal tap, because they obviously need to get that right. But the procedure, I hadn't even known that they'd started. And so because they said, yeah, what we'll do is once they're out, we won't reveal the sex. We'll just drop the drape and sort of hold them up in like a Lion King sort of in this here moment. And before I knew it, they said, okay, you ready to lower the drapes? And I was like, oh my God, what? I didn't even know we started. Like, other than just like sort of moving around a little bit, I didn't know that they had started.
Wow.
And it was so quick. And anyway, they dropped the drape. I had a great student midwife. Highly recommend anyone. The student midwife process is phenomenal. My student midwife came to all my appointments. She was there for the birth. She acted like a pseudo photographer and cinematographer in the delivery suite. She was just remarkable. And she
so when she arrived, tell us when you looked at her for the first time.
Oh, it was beautiful. Well, I mean, it was a bit confusing because everything was so swollen. So when they held her up, I was like, oh my God, is that a vagina or are they testicles? Like, and I'm sort of like, I'm strapped to the table and I'm like trying to look up thinking, testicles, like, where's the penis? Is this and both Mum and I were like sort of, oh, and then someone in the background, I don't know, maybe part of the anaesthetist team went, it's a girl. And I'm like, so that sort of backfired on me.
Wasn't how you imagined it.
No,
that you'd look and not actually get what it was.
Not at all. I was, because it's very swollen. I didn't know that would happen.
There you go.
The moment, and you're nervous in a cesarean for that first cry, right? So that was where my then nervousness switched to be like, is she going to be okay? Because she was early. But the moment after they held her up, then she just let out this big cry. And she went over the table. Mum got to cut the cord. You can come back. Yeah, she's Mum got to cut the cord and be there for that whole process. She stitched me up.
Beautiful.
I got immediate skin-to-skin contact after that.
Fantastic. So, Shirley, tell us, how was that for you when you met your granddaughter?
Well, look, it was so exciting. I was able to, when they held her up, it was just amazing because it was so quick. And she was healthy, and I went over and I was able to cut the cord, which was really special. I was a bit nervous, but it's gorgeous. And then they wrapped her up and brought her over to Renee straight away. And so we took many happy snaps, and it was just a very special experience.
Beautiful. So can I ask you a question, Shirley? What advice would you give to a mother who wants to be in the birth with their daughter? Have you got any ideas around that?
Go for it. As I said before, I was a little bit nervous about it. But having done it now, it was just the most special moment.
What did you learn that helped you to be able to hold space? Because it can be very easy for mothers to get triggered by seeing their daughters in difficult situations. What did you learn that helped you to manage that?
Well, as Renee was going through that induction process, I knew that she could handle anything really, because she was so calm and focused, and it was just lovely to see. So I knew that whatever was,
so you just had confidence.
She'd be able to handle, and she did it beautifully.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Renee, what would you share with a pregnant woman?
Just go with the flow, but also don't be afraid to hold your ground and stop something if it doesn't feel right. And I think that's probably the biggest learning that I have. If you're going, especially in that induction process, ask the questions. If I had known that they usually do the balloon catheter first, then I would have absolutely have said, oh, before we do the tape, shouldn't we do the balloon catheter? So just really stepping into the power that you have in that journey. It is about you and your experience in welcoming your baby into the world. And so why not do it your way? This is the time to do it your way and ask for the things that you want, or to stop the things that don't feel right.
Yeah, beautiful. That was a powerful, story from that perspective of being able to really prepare well, have good support, go through the process that feels right for you, try to find your true north in that, but also be okay to push back and follow your own inclinations around what has to happen. Because too often as women, we walk into these busy places called hospitals and we hand the power over because they're health professionals and we expect them to know what's best. But if you do things through birth without really assessing what the mother's sensing and feeling and what she feels like needs to happen, then the decision making and the outcomes are generally not as good without the input of the mother. So stepping up and learning about birth, learning about options, learning about processes and procedures, and always remembering that you can say no.
Yeah,
you actually have the final veto and the final power of that. That was a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing with our audience today, and I hope you've learnt lots through that. We're very, very fortunate to have lots of different stories that can help us to learn what can move the needle in birth. So why not join us again next week and we'll have some more goodness for you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.